the Toronto Raptors, it's time for the Wrap It Up segment. And as we're recording this, the Toronto Raptors are in a heated battle right now with the Indiana Pacers. So without knowing, obviously, what's going to happen in this game, we're going to discuss just what's been going on with the Raptors recently. And I was at the Jay-Z concert this week when my phone started blowing up, and it just was multiple text messages from a group text, and it was just multiple references to a 28-0 run, which confused me because I was like, wait, what are we talking about right now? Like, that doesn't seem like a real life thing. And then I saw the highlights. I don't know. Like, how is that a thing?
What happens at halftime that you come out of a halftime so flat? And what is Jeff Hornacek saying to the Knicks at halftime?
I read Knicks wrap up of what happened, and from ESPN,
a little different vibe on the Knicks wrap up than the Raptors,
right? And the thing that happened here was they were saying in the Knicks locker room things were getting kind of heated. So at halftime, your boy, Coach Jeff Hornacek, was really unhappy with the effort that New York was giving on defense, in particular Courtney Lee and how much money did your boy sign for? Tim Hardaway Jr.? The $72 million man, Tim Hardaway Jr.?
Yo, he had crazy numbers. He was like,
he's balling.
He was at like 27, 7, and 7, man.
He is balling. Like, it's bad now, and I know he's been getting a lot of bad pub for his contract, but he's been doing well for them.
He's been balling for sure.
But Courtney Lee went to the media after, and he said at halftime, quote, "We came in here, we watched film, and coach kind of got on me. I really didn't like what was being said. It was a little explicit, and I don't think I can repeat what he said to the media, but we exchanged words, and we went from there." That is awesome. I wish he could tell us what he said.
Coach Hornacek, man, getting into it.
But what do we guess that Coach Hornacek said for them to come out and go on a 28-0 run? Like, that's amazing.
Call them all Nancy's.
Oh, man, that's so amazing.
I did like, he probably just said, you're Courtney Lee. You're terrible.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy for the Toronto Raptors. But the other thing that came out of that, though, with their trip to New York, was it gave time for them to make their way into the New York Times. And there's a great article in said New York Times, and the headline states, "The Raptors remade their mindset, not their roster, and it's working." Obviously, remove the one game in New York aside, but I think we can still say the Raptors do look a lot different this year, right? And they're doing a pretty good job so far. But this goes in depth, and obviously it starts off talking about just the Masai quotes from the offseason and how we need the culture reset and how Dwayne Casey isn't really, like, he was a defensive coach, but how he bought in and everyone seemed to try to buy in that, hey, this is what we're going to do, despite the fact that you're trying to change your culture but keep the same pieces. And the biggest key to this whole thing has been Kyle Lowry. I'll just read a little part of this article here, but Lowry's role has changed. Instead of dribbling the ball up the court, he often feeds it ahead to a teammate on the wing, and there are possessions, more than a few, when the ball doesn't return to him. He is averaging nearly 11 fewer touches per game compared to last season, with fewer points at 14.6 and fewer shot attempts too. At the end of the day, though, how's this looking for the Raptors? It looks great for them, no?
Oh, yeah. I mean, other than the hiccup of giving it a 28-0 run to the Knicks, they've looked awesome in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's almost like after we talked about it in that podcast, it seems like Lowry bought in.
Yeah.
And while it's kind of a little bit out of his comfort zone, I think he's like coming into that role right now. And the Raptors offense looks really good.
The offense is flowing. Everyone seems to be fitting in, including DeMar DeRozan, who I think people were, how would the mid-range game work? Right? Like, you're trying to eliminate that, but that is DeMar's game. Right? Like, isn't that the interesting part here? DeMar DeRozan, who lives and dies by the 17-footer.
Yeah, that shot is still useful on a team in the NBA, and not just a bottom of the barrel team, but like a top 3 in a conference. Like, this is a shot that's been kind of like bred out of us by how the game has gone in the last couple of years. But I mean, it goes to show that you can build a system around a player's strength if that strength is strong enough.
Yeah, definitely one of those things where you get a chance to see just how important your star players buying into a system, right? Because this was never going to work unless these two guys bought in, and they definitely have, and they look so much better so far, just as an overall team, because you want to be able to have Lowry and DeRozan healthy towards the end of the season, which means them carrying less of a load night in and night out. But also, you're going to need Siakam. You're going to need Freddie Van Fleet. You're going to need these guys to step up. So it's imperative that you have these guys in a role where they're able to contribute and make plays, and everything just not relying on those two guys. So it's super interesting to see that and see the Raptors get some love in a mainstream outlet like the New York Times, right?
Hey, that's a really good point, too, because not only are they successfully implementing this system of a new offense, but you're right, it's doing two things. It's getting young players involved, so when it gets down to it, they're not going to be scared, and it's resting your two best offensive players, no question about it, for the playoffs. So when things do slow down and maybe that kind of kick it around style may not work, things get a little more bogged down on the offense, they're going to have two players who are going to be well rested, who know how to play that system as well.
Yeah, and the other thing that was super interesting too, I mentioned Nick Nurse, and there's a lot of stuff in there that I didn't know, right? Like it said, Nurse came to the Raptors after he was the head coach of the Rio Grande Valley Rapids of what is now the G League, of course, right?
Yeah, don't call it the D League.
Right, but the key part of that is they were affiliated with the Houston Rockets, right? And if you remember, before this whole Houston Rockets, what we see now with the Houston Rockets just shooting threes and doing layups, that was actually a thing they did as a trial with their D-League team based on the analytics. So it eliminated the long twos. Remember that, right? Do you remember that story from I want to say 3 years ago?
I remember that.
So what they did was the Houston Rockets a couple years, and I remember seeing this story separately. I just never put the pieces together that it was Nick Nurse that was the coach of that team.
Yeah.
And so what they did was before they implemented it in the NBA, they tried it with their D-League team. And so they basically do exactly what the Rockets do now. You eliminate the mid-range game and you base your whole offense on layups and three-pointers. And so Nick Nurse was the coach of that team, and obviously you see it now in the NBA with the Rockets. So it worked with the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, and they led the D-League in three-point attempts. They won the championship in 2013.
Crazy.
And Nurse was really ahead of the curve in terms of this analytics curve, in terms of viewing layups and three-pointers as the most efficient shots and eliminating the mid-range game. So it's kind of cool. Like I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a thing. And maybe I'm just like behind all the times and like all Raptor fans knew that this was a thing. But I found it very interesting. And I guess that's kind of like the cool part about these mainstream things, right? Like, because it's in the New York Times, like it caught my attention. I was like, oh shit, New York Times is writing about the Raptors. Let me sit down and read this article. I'm sure, the Doug Smiths or whoever cover the local Raptors, I'm sure they've already been all over this story with Nick Nurse. But I think we got to give him a lot of credit, especially the fact that he's gotten these guys to buy in. But the one thing I found pretty interesting, it also said that he also acknowledges that you make allowances, right? And when you have DeMar DeRozan as your best player, of course, you're going to make allowances and let him do what he does. So, I mean, shout out to the Raptors. They're off to a great start.
Shout out to the paper of record, the New York Times.